Hey, everybody. Welcome. Another terrific edition of Deborah Kobylt Live. And in studio with me is a friend, Henry Barclay. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
He runs an organization that I'm passionate about, that I'm involved with, and that I'm on the board with, Stop Poaching Now. And you're in town. Thank you for coming here from England. You travel all over the place.
Yeah, I travel quite a bit.
You travel quite a bit.
Yeah.
And our organization, Stop Poaching Now, is having what's called the E-Race Extinction Ride on April 29th. I want you to tell us a little bit about that, because what we're trying to do, of course, is raise money and awareness to poaching. Take it away. Tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll talk a little bit about
So like
poaching.
you said, it's next Sunday, Sunday 29th.
In Los Angeles.
In Los Angeles, in Cycle Bar in West Hollywood. Essentially what we're doing is having a sort of an indoor cycling event, a sort of spin event fundraiser.
Look, you don't have to be great at spinning either. I know a lot of people are freaked out. They're like, wait a minute, I don't spin. That's okay. Just go in the back of the room, just get on your bike and do your thing.
And enjoy the event. If you come along, you'll get a gift bag, and there'll be sort of food and drink and step and repeat if you want to take pictures. And what you can do is choose a team. So either Team Rhino, Team Elephant, Team Tiger. Depending on which species you want your money, your ticket money to go towards.
I always go with Team Heidi.
Team Heidi. Oh, Heidi is a force of nature.
She's the founder.
She's the founder.
Shout out to you, Heidi. She's amazing.
Shout out to Heidi.
So continue on.
And for those of you who are more physically fit, for the person who does manage to cycle the furthest, there is a bike to be won. So there are prizes. But yeah, you can go to the website to find out all sorts of information. You can either just Google Stop Poaching Now or go to stoppoaching-now.org. All the information's up there, the sign up information as well. And it goes from 12 midday until 3 p.m. on Sunday 29th.
So you're saying you don't have to ride the whole 3 hours.
No,
you just pop in and pop out.
Yeah, you can just pop in.
We don't want to intimidate anybody. We're like, oh wait, whoa.
So there are two classes that you can sign up to. There's either the 12 till 1 or the 1 till 2, and both will be really, really good fun. We've got sort of great instructors. Cycle Bar, if any of you guys know it, is absolutely fantastic. They've been incredibly supportive.
Yeah, they're terrific.
They're absolutely
Cycle
fantastic.
Bar in West Hollywood.
Yeah.
But let's talk a little bit about the money that's going to be raised for Stop Poaching Now. What do you do at Stop Poaching Now? I mean, Heidi founded this in 2014. Tell me a little bit about the organization.
So the organization was pretty much built with the aim to stop the poaching of endangered species within our lifetimes. And primarily focusing on three species, or three species groups, as it were, being elephants, rhinos, and tigers. And the reason being for these species is because they are sort of flagship keystone species, and their survival is critically important, right? So some of them, say elephants, for instance, I would consider a keystone species, meaning that they have a disproportionately large effect on their ecosystems.
Explain that to us. So for people who don't know, a lot of people don't. They haven't traveled to these regions, and they may just see them in zoos and perhaps don't quite get the importance of this.
Well, so ecosystems are remarkably complex, right? And everything is interconnected. And so a species like elephants, for example, there's a direct correlation between an elephant population in an area and the severity of savanna fires. The reason being is that if you remove elephants, you end up with more grass, more fuel. The fires then burn for longer and far wider. And obviously that has dramatic effects on the surrounding animal populations as well as the surrounding human populations. There are also countless bird, lizard, and predator species whose populations are directly or indirectly connected to the elephant populations, for instance.
Why are these creatures being poached?
So rather unfortunately, for many reasons, and it can get rather complex, but then again, conversely simple at the same time. A lot of the time for products that are just valuable, right? There is a need for, or at least a demand on the black market for products such as rhino horn, for ivory, for skins, on tigers. Everything from the whiskers through to the tail is all sellable. The motivation behind the purchase of those is very varied.
What do they do with the skins and the whiskers?
All sorts. They can either be used or either are used, I should say, as sort of almost decorative items, sometimes in traditional medicines. But those are probably two of the most commonly used reasons for having those and purchasing those on the black market.
And for China, having banned the sale of ivory, right?
Yeah.
That's huge.
Huge. And then Hong Kong as well. You know, China's over the last sort of decade has repeatedly had this brought up and thrown in their face over and over and over again. And suddenly they've made this massive step forward, which is really, really commendable. Obviously, the issue with just changing laws is it will never fully solve the issue in and of itself, because there will always be loopholes. There was a paper that came out that showed that as soon as the ivory ban was put in place, there happened to be a rapid sale in antique mammoth ivory. And so the issue is, unless you stop the demand and you stop the intrinsic issues as to why these animals are poached, there will always be poaching. So while the ban is fantastic and a huge move forward on China's part, there is still a lot of work needing to be done to really try and get down to the bottom of the issue of why the animals are poached and to solve that.
So Damian Mander, he is out there, boots on the ground, trying to stop these poachers. So why don't you tell me how difficult of a job that is? And first of all, how much money do they make, these poachers? Well, let's say they kill a rhino and or they kill an elephant. What do they fetch for that?
Well, it depends what part in the food chain you sit in terms of that organized crime network, because that's what it is. It is organized crime.
Absolutely.
You know, for the individuals actually pulling the trigger, a lot of the time, you know, they will be unemployed. They have suddenly been given an option to get a large cash out, to risk their life, because a lot of the time in many of these countries there's a shoot and sight policy for poachers. And they'll shoot often sort of in smallish teams, around sort of 4 or 5. But the problem is, if you arrest one or if one is shot, then simply what happens is that particular group just goes into hiding, relocates, they rehire or re-recruit a new person, then they reappear. And the actual individuals risking the most get paid very little, actually. And most of the money goes into those who are trafficking and those at the top of those organized crime networks, as I suppose most organized crime networks would function.
But what can be done in these countries that are allowing this to happen? Okay, these people need money, and very, very well maybe that they don't want to be doing this, but they're doing this because they can't feed their families. What can be done to work with the governments?
Yeah, so
I don't think they necessarily don't really care, do they?
Well, I mean, so say the government in Botswana is absolutely fantastic, but it really does depend. There are some governments who are less supportive, and there is a noticeable change depending on who, you know, when new presidents are elected. But I think in terms of actually trying to solve this issue, that you have to take a multifaceted approach. You can't just sort of just focus on law enforcement. Likewise, you can't just work on education and job creation. You do have to fix all of it. So, for instance, you know, if you're
huge job,
it's a huge job.
It's like the fingers on your hand. You can't. Yeah. You need them all.
Yeah, and so that's why, sort of, with what we're doing, we've just set up a site in Zambia in the Luangwa Valley, and what that does is it pulls many smaller organizations together, who are all sort of focused on their own sort of part of this. So, human-wildlife conflict mitigation, law enforcement, education. And trying to bring those organizations closer together to be able to help them to work together to solve this very, very complex and large issue. And so that's what we are really trying to push, is not necessarily just being another charity in the mix, but being a charity that can help build on and make more efficient the work presently being done, to make sure that we can just, in the end of the day, make sure these species are still around for, say, my future children, their children, to be able to see in the flesh rather than just hearing about it in storybooks.
It's heartbreaking that the last male white northern rhino, named Sudan, in fact, died. Now, 2 females are still alive of that species, and I know that they've collected DNA from this male rhino, but it's not so easy. That's incredible to me that in my lifetime, a species has gone virtually extinct.
Yeah, so I mean, the northern white rhino is a subspecies, and it is sort of its extinction is really really very sad to watch, but it's also very interesting. It's a hard decision now in terms of conservation. You know, they have the ability, very, very expensive and very unknown as to whether they'd actually be able to recreate the subspecies through IVF.
Right.
The difficulty being is that rhino reproductive tracts are actually quite tricky. But on top of that would cost a huge amount of money, and whether the money is best placed doing that where they were actually functionally extinct many years ago. So once you get below a certain population number,
I understand.
functionally, genetically wise, you're going to really struggle to bring back a functional population. But you then got to look at whether if you're going to spend hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands on bringing back a single individual, is that money better spent trying to save thousands of individuals by being able to cover that area who are still alive? And really sort of focusing on that. And I think that's sort of a tough issue to tackle at the moment, mainly because it's almost, when you lose a subspecies, it's almost, when you say that we don't want to use IVF and we don't want to bring them back, it almost feels like giving up. It almost feels like we've lost that battle. And I think that's why it's tough. But I think the reason why these large species, these large sort of the last terrestrial megafauna are so important is because they are very socially complex and emotional animals. They are far easier for us to be able to connect with, to empathize with, and to sort of identify with. And I feel the really large issue is if we lose these last terrestrial megafauna, future generations will find it a lot harder to identify with and empathize with nature in general.
I mean, I know being over in Africa a couple of times, when the elephant families walk by, they will look at you in the eye and nod and move on. Just because we're human, it doesn't mean we're the only ones here to make the decisions. I mean, if people could have more access to seeing that these are families, that these are creatures put on the earth just like we were, that's difficult to do because most people don't have the means to travel, in which case I know a lot of people are against zoos. But very often a zoo is the only real place that a child can see an animal and develop an empathy for the animal,
Yeah. I mean, elephants, again, in taking that species as an example, are incredibly complex. I mean, they will go back to revisit the bones of a loved one and touch the bones with their trunk and revisit that. And it's a very emotional thing to witness. They also, much like many sort of very intelligent species, play. They're known to enjoy
They're adorable.
Their time. They're cute. They're so cute.
Absolutely adorable.
They're amazing. And then, touching on that zoos topic, yes, I think a lot of people are very upset with the idea of putting animals in cages, and it does upset me. But I think like you said, with people who are unable to afford to go to these magnificent places, but still want to be able to ensure their survival, I think zoos do play an important part in inspiration and an important part in people being able to connect. I never would have become a zoologist if my mum and my dad had not taken me relentlessly to zoos throughout my childhood.
Sometimes on my social media feed on Instagram, I always, like the little things that pop up there, wild animals. I must have 10 of them that come up. And, these cute little things that they're doing all the time. That's another way to sort of engage and get to know a little bit about the animal kingdom and what they do. Just last night I was looking at one, I think it was a gorilla, and just the way that she was playing and holding her little baby. And it sort of humanizes the animal for people. It's a difficult task. I know that you also have a large educational component with Stop Poaching Now.
Yeah, a very large educational component. So we also have, as Deborah mentions, an educational program. So not only are we sort of on the ground and working in education there, but here in California as well, we go into schools to give talks to sort of in both sort of educate the kids and to inspire the kids. Teach them a little bit about these animals and what is being done to conserve them and the challenges that are being faced. But it's a great talk. We've actually got a new educational director called Graham. He's absolutely fantastic. If you do either work at, run, or have a child in school in California,
reach out to Stop Poaching Now.
Do reach out.
Because we would love to come and speak to your schools.
Yeah, we'd love to come in and speak. Graham's absolutely fantastic. And I think it's a real chance for kids to further connect with these animals and learn more about them in a more intrinsic way, and work out again, if especially if they have never had the chance or the opportunity yet to see these animals in the flesh, to then spark that interest, and perhaps that's a future route and future passion that child will have for the rest of their life. Absolutely
wonderful. And also we need to cut off the areas where people can buy this stuff, no ivory, no anything, just cut it off. It's no longer available to be purchased, whether it's in a pin or anything else.
Yeah, it's absolutely critical that entire industry stop. But our sort of method of trying to stop that is we are now starting in our sort of preliminary stages of starting to reach out into Vietnam, into China, there are very key communities within those countries that have a higher density of, or more known to purchase these products. And our way of going about this is going in, or will be to go in and educate these communities, because the science essentially says that emotional responses are great. They are more immediate, but unfortunately once the emotion goes, the change goes. Whereas with education, if someone creates a behavioral change through education, that's usually a lifelong change.
Absolutely.
And that is our long-term approach to trying to stop the poaching of these species, is to create that long-term change starting with this next generation. And also why we obviously then take part in conservation is because some of these species just don't have that time. And so that's why we then focus on both education and conservation.
Henry Barclay with Stop Poaching Now. People want to get involved. They go to what? Stop Poaching Now.
StopPoaching-now.org, or you can literally just Google Stop Poaching Now. It will come up.
It'll pop up in all various forms of social media. It's there.
Yes. Yeah.
Please donate. This is important stuff, and the people working on this are important. All the money goes to helping to stopping the poaching of these creatures. Yeah. Shout out to Damian Mander, who's out there in Africa doing incredible work to prevent the poachers from doing what it is that they're doing. And the ride on April 29th. You don't have to do it for the entire 3 hours, but it is from noon to 3 at Cycle Bar in West Hollywood.
Do come along.
You'll be there in your biking shorts?
I'll be there. I will be there. If not, that's an incentive all in itself.
There you go. There's an incentive. Come and see Henry in his biking shorts at the Cycle Bar and give to the to Stop Poaching Now while you're at it. Anyway, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for
I really
having
appreciate it. And we'll see you actually tomorrow night. We're going to go to an event.
Yes.
So thanks a lot. It's
thank
really
you so
terrific.
much.
Very passionate about this. And thank you for being here for another fun edition of Deborah Kobylt Live. Again, that's Stop Poaching Now, and we'll see you later.